she appeared to have a perfect life. She had a fortune worth around $130 billion, lived in a massive mansion covering 66,000 square feet, and shared her life with 3 beautiful children and a husband the world admired as a brilliant genius. From the outside, everything looked flawless. But inside those walls, the reality was very different. Melinda Gates was struggling in ways she never had before. She found herself lying on the floor in tears, overwhelmed by panic attacks that came without warning. She woke up screaming from terrifying nightmares where her home collapsed around her. After staying silent for 27 years, she finally decided to speak honestly about what truly happened inside her marriage and what pushed her to walk away. The moment that changed everything came in late October of 2019. Melinda was alone in her home office, casually scrolling through the news, when she came across a newly published article from the New York Times. As she read the headline, a deep sense of fear ran through her. The article described her husband Bill Gates and his repeated meetings with Jeffrey Epstein, a convicted sex offender who had become one of the most hated men in America. This was not new information to Melinda. She had warned Bill about Epstein years earlier. She had begged him to stay away. She had been clear about her feelings after meeting Epstein just once at his Manhattan townhouse in 2013. That single meeting left her deeply disturbed. She later explained that the moment she walked through the door, she regretted being there. She described Epstein as evil and said the experience haunted her long after it ended. Melinda later shared in an interview with Gayle King that she had nightmares after that one encounter. She felt something dark and deeply wrong about Epstein. Her instincts told her to stay far away from him, and she made that clear to her husband. She told Bill that she wanted nothing to do with Epstein and did not want him involved either. But Bill ignored her wishes. He continued to meet Epstein, again and again. According to reports, Bill Gates met with Jeffrey Epstein at least 6 documented times between 2011 and 2014. Some investigations suggest there may have been many more meetings. These were not short or accidental encounters. They were long dinners, late-night conversations, and private discussions about business and philanthropy, all with a man who had already admitted to serious crimes involving minors. By October 2019, the truth was no longer hidden. The New York Times article made the story public, and within days, Melinda took action. She contacted divorce lawyers, not just one, but several. She needed to understand her options because she felt her marriage of nearly 3 decades was falling apart. Reports later revealed that she had multiple conversations with attorneys in the days following the article. She was no longer just hurt or disappointed. She was preparing to protect herself and her children from whatever consequences were coming. However, Epstein was not the only secret that had been kept from her. There was another truth, buried for almost 20 years, that was about to come to light. This one had nothing to do with Epstein. It involved an affair that took place while Bill Gates was still running Microsoft. A letter arrived at Microsoft headquarters written by a woman who claimed she had a relationship with Bill Gates years earlier. She wanted Melinda to know the truth. The woman was a Microsoft engineer. According to reports, the relationship began around the year 2000, when Bill Gates was the chief executive officer of one of the most powerful technology companies in the world. At that time, Bill and Melinda had already been married for 6 years. They had young children. Their daughter Jennifer was born in 1996, their son Rory in 1999, and their youngest child would be born later. While his children were still very young and his marriage was still in its early years, Bill allegedly began this affair. For nearly 2 decades, the secret remained hidden. The woman stayed silent, and Bill carried on with his life. But in late 2019, she decided she could no longer keep quiet. She wrote to the Microsoft board of directors, hoping the truth would finally reach Melinda. The board understood immediately how serious the situation was. This was not just a private matter. It involved the founder of Microsoft and had the potential to cause major damage to the company's reputation. Microsoft launched an internal investigation and hired outside lawyers to examine the claims. They interviewed people and reviewed evidence to understand what had happened. Whatever they found was serious enough to lead to a major decision. In March 2020, Bill Gates resigned from the Microsoft board while the investigation was still ongoing. He stepped away from the company he had built from the ground up, a company that had made him one of the richest men in history. Later, a spokesperson confirmed that Bill had indeed had an affair nearly 20 years earlier and said it ended on friendly terms. But many people questioned how an affair during a marriage could ever truly be described that way. As reporters continued digging, more troubling behavior came to light. Investigations revealed a pattern of inappropriate interactions between Bill Gates and women at both Microsoft and the Gates Foundation. In 2006, Bill reportedly emailed a female employee after watching her give a presentation. He asked her to dinner and added a line suggesting she should ignore the message if it made her uncomfortable, showing that he knew the request was inappropriate. Between 2007 and 2008, Microsoft executives discovered a series of improper emails between Bill and another employee. Senior leaders had to step in and tell him to stop. The behavior did not stop at Microsoft. Reports claim that during a work trip for the Gates Foundation, Bill approached a female employee at a cocktail event and asked her to have dinner with him. This was a professional setting, and she was his employee. It showed a repeated lack of boundaries. When Melinda finally spoke publicly in March 2022, Gayle King asked her directly if there had been more than one woman. Melinda paused before answering. She did not deny it, but she made it clear that Bill was responsible for answering those questions. She was no longer protecting him or covering for his actions. Jeffrey Epstein remained a dark presence in the story. Despite his conviction in 2008 for procuring a child for prostitution, powerful men continued to associate with him. Bill Gates was one of them. Their meetings began in 2011, long after Epstein's crimes were widely known. Melinda strongly objected to these meetings and told Bill to stop. He did not. Later released messages revealed how deeply involved Bill had been. In texts from 2017, Bill's advisor told Epstein that Bill wanted to talk to him but that his wife would not allow it. The advisor even said that Bill loved Epstein and felt bad about ending their plans because of Melinda's objections. These messages showed that Melinda was the only thing standing between Bill and continued contact with Epstein. When Epstein died in prison in August 2019, Melinda hoped that chapter was finally over. But just 2 months later, the New York Times article brought everything into the open. In her memoir, Melinda described this moment as overwhelming. The article forced her to confront serious questions about Bill's behavior and whether he had betrayed not only their marriage but her deepest values. By this time, Melinda had been suffering from intense emotional distress for months. Her nightmares were relentless. She dreamed of houses collapsing, of falling, of everything she loved being destroyed. These dreams mirrored what was happening in her real life. Her marriage was already over in her heart, even if she had not fully accepted it yet. The period between late 2019 and early 2021 was the darkest time of her life. At 55 years old, after 25 years of marriage, she watched her family fall apart. In interviews and in her memoir, she spoke honestly about how broken she felt. She experienced panic attacks for the first time. She struggled to breathe, her heart raced, and she felt completely out of control. She also described days when she could not even stand up. She would lie on the floor crying, unable to understand how her life had reached this point. For someone who had spent years leading global initiatives and speaking confidently to world leaders, this loss of control was devastating. She was no longer the composed public figure people admired. She was a woman grieving the life she thought she had. Melinda Gates' story revealed that wealth, power, and success do not protect anyone from pain. Behind the image of a perfect marriage was years of silence, betrayal, and emotional suffering. When she finally chose to speak, it was not to seek revenge or attention, but to reclaim her truth and begin rebuilding her life on her own terms. In February 2020, during a trip to New Mexico, Melinda finally gathered the strength to say out loud what she had been carrying inside for months. She told Bill that she wanted to live separately and that she wanted to begin ending their marriage. Saying the words did not come easily, but once she did, there was no turning back. Bill's reaction surprised her. He was sad and clearly upset, but he was also calm, respectful, and understanding. There was no explosion, no shouting, no denial. It was almost as if he had expected this moment to arrive. Perhaps he already knew that the choices he had made had pushed their relationship beyond repair. Perhaps he understood that the trust between them had been broken in ways that could not be fixed. After that conversation, nothing happened quickly. For more than a year, they worked through the complicated reality of separating a 27-year marriage. There were countless details to manage. They had to decide how to handle the foundation they had built together, how to divide their enormous wealth, how to support their children, and how and when to tell the public. Every decision required careful planning. Every asset had to be listed and evaluated. Every future interaction had to be discussed and agreed upon. Ending a marriage at that level was not just emotional, it was deeply logistical. On May 3, 2021, they finally made the announcement. In a joint statement shared publicly, they said that after a great deal of thought and a lot of work on their relationship, they had decided to end their marriage. The words were calm and respectful, but behind them was years of pain and private struggle. 3 months later, on August 2, 2021, a judge in King County, Washington officially finalized the divorce. Legally, the marriage was over. But emotionally and publicly, the story was far from finished. At the time of the divorce, Bill and Melinda Gates were worth an estimated $130 billion together. That made their split one of the largest and most complex divorces in history. The scale of what had to be divided was enormous. On the very day the divorce was announced, Bill began transferring assets to Melinda. Financial records later showed that he moved about $2.4 billion in stocks to her that same day. These included major shares in companies such as Canadian National Railway and Coca-Cola FEMSA. Billions of dollars changed hands almost instantly, and that was only the beginning. They also had to divide an extensive real estate portfolio worth roughly $170 million. Over the years, Bill had purchased properties across the United States and beyond. The most famous was their main home near Seattle, a 66,000 square foot mansion known as Xanadu 2.0. It took 7 years to build and cost more than $60 million. In addition to that home, there were properties in California, Florida, and other locations. Each one had to be evaluated and assigned to one of them. The process was complex and exhausting. The hardest question involved the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. They had built it together over more than 25 years. It held over $50 billion in assets and was one of the most powerful charitable organizations in the world. It funded global health programs, education initiatives, and efforts to reduce poverty. At first, they tried to continue working together. Melinda agreed to stay on as co-chair for a 2-year trial period to see if they could still lead the foundation as partners despite being divorced. For a while, they attempted to make it work. They attended meetings together and made decisions jointly. But over time, it became clear that the arrangement was not sustainable. By June 2024, Melinda announced that she was leaving the foundation completely. She said she could no longer work alongside her ex-husband and needed to move forward on her own. As part of her departure, there was one final, powerful change. The foundation was renamed. For 25 years, it had carried both their names. Her name had been right there, representing her equal role in building the organization. Now, that chapter was ending. Bill agreed to transfer a massive sum to support Melinda's independent charitable work. The amount was $12.5 billion. That money allowed her to step away and fund her own vision, but it also marked the end of a partnership that had defined much of her adult life. When asked about leaving the foundation, Melinda said something that revealed how she felt about this new phase. She said she was completely free to work in any way she wanted. For the first time in decades, she did not have to compromise her ideas or worry about fitting them into someone else's framework. She could support causes Bill might not have chosen. She could speak openly without concern for how it might affect the foundation's image. That freedom came with loss, but it also came with relief. In April 2025, Melinda appeared on a late-night television show to promote her memoir, the next day. The host asked her what Bill's affair had taught her about marriage. Her answer was simple but powerful. She said she learned that a real marriage requires honesty and trust from both partners. Without that, there can be no intimacy. And because that honesty was missing, she had to leave. Those words, "I had to go," explain everything. She did not frame it as a choice made lightly or a mutual decision. Staying would have meant losing herself. In her memoir, she wrote about how therapy helped her understand why she had accepted things she should not have. She reflected on how she had grown smaller in the marriage, putting aside her own needs to support Bill's life and reputation. Over time, she realized she no longer recognized herself. After leaving the foundation, Melinda focused on her own organization, Pivotal Ventures. Through it, she has committed more than $1 billion to advancing women and girls. She announced major investments in women's health, an area she believes has been overlooked for far too long. These choices reflect her values and her voice, fully her own. She also found love again. In October 2024, she went public with a new relationship. Photographers spotted her holding hands with Philip Vaughn, a tech entrepreneur younger than her. They later appeared together at a major awards event, smiling and clearly comfortable with one another. When asked about the relationship, Melinda said simply that it had been pretty great. She later told a magazine that she was very happy. At 60, Melinda spoke openly about feeling strong and energized, even if her body sometimes reminded her of her age. She talked about wanting to stay curious, keep learning, and surround herself with people who inspire her. Her circle now includes women who understand reinvention and resilience. She does not present herself as someone who has all the answers, but her message is clear. Changing your life takes courage, but it can open the door to something new. After decades of being defined by her marriage, Melinda reclaimed her name, her identity, and her future. She moved from silence to honesty, from fear to freedom. Her story shows that it is never too late to choose yourself and step into a life that feels true.